One of the essentials of therapy is knowing how to focus a session to produce maximum impact. And today we're going to talk to therapists about how to do that much more readily. I'm Jonathan Pishner with Apex Counseling, and today we are talking about focusing a session. A number of therapists, especially newer therapists, who are not aware of A, how to focus a session, and B, the importance of it. So let's jump ahead to the importance of it, and then we'll talk about how to do it. So the importance of focusing a session is all about producing impact, because if you don't spend enough time on a topic, you don't have enough opportunity to flesh it out. You don't have enough opportunity to answer questions. You don't have enough opportunity to help teach a person how to deal with it. So let's do even a simple and basic one. As a cognitive behavior therapist, one of the things I do is I help people learn how to change their thinking in service of changing their emotions. So on the surface, that sounds simple. However, what I have learned is that I can't just say, oh, tell yourself happier thoughts, and now let's pick happier thoughts for you to tell yourself this week, and now you're going to feel great. That's really not how it works. What ends up happening is the very first day, I'll focus the session on here's the model. Here's what this looks like. You identify a thought, you find a way to challenge a thought, you try and replace it with something that's more useful. And then we'll focus the session further. And instead of just practicing it a bunch, is I'll help them figure out how to identify their thoughts, because even that is not necessarily something that's easy to people. So what I'm doing is I'm shrinking it down and making sure that the person can properly absorb the information. And depending on who's sitting in front of me, I might move a little more rapidly, or I might slow way down in service of focusing the session. But the reason this is important is if your client walks out of your office and can't apply anything you're discussing with them, well, then what's the point? They basically didn't get anything other than talking to a pleasant person for an hour. They don't have a thing to apply if you don't know how to focus the session so that they walk out with the needed information. So there's why it's important. Now, how do you focus the session? Because this is where I erred when I was talking to a trainee. I said, oh, just focus the session more, as if it was obvious how to do that. And so how to focus a session is you select the important message of the session. And then you basically continually find ways to circle back to that. So in our cognitive behavior example, if somebody kept telling more and more stories about how this person upset them, I would then refocus to, oh, okay, so what thoughts did you have about that person that upset you? Because I'm focusing on that specific topic. If we're just learning a basic breathing exercise, I'll maintain the focus on, learn the breathing exercise. Once that's done, okay, how are you going to use this in between times? How are you going to use this if you start needing it but other people are around? Are you going to excuse yourself? Are you going to do your breathing exercise in front of everybody? So I'm holding focus on the day's topic no matter what. Now, sometimes you do have to switch topics depending on what your client brings into the room. But the classical mistake of many therapists is that they just bounce topic to topic to topic to topic, and then the client walks away having been given information, but none of it's applicable because the therapist didn't hold focus on it and go deep. So here is your easy way to figure out, are you focusing the session enough for your specific client? And you can even ask this directly to the client if you want, or you can use it as a thought exercise. So one of the ways I check to see if I've focused a session properly is I will ask myself, how easy is it for me to imagine that this person will take this information out of my office and will actually be able to use it? If my answer is that I'm not sure they can, then I've probably either failed to focus the session properly, or I've just picked the wrong tool, one of those things. But oftentimes it can be failure to focus the session properly. So for you as the therapist, check your own thinking and see, how well would I imagine my client applying this between sessions? If you could imagine that very, very easily, then you may have held enough focus on this. But if it's hard for you to imagine them knowing how to do that, if you sense that they really are not getting it, you haven't held enough focus on this. Uh, and if you're not sure, you can always ask. You can take the last 10 minutes of session and say, hey, I want to make sure you're getting good value. Please walk me through how you will utilize this in between sessions. That's a perfectly fine way to check your own thinking until you're able to have a felt sense of whether or not your client would be able to do that. But the key today is knowing how to hold focus and not rushing therapy, because what many therapists, just in their hunger to be helpful, they give tons of information, but they accidentally make it non-actionable because your client isn't ready for 16 coping skills. They're ready for one part of one coping skill. So that's my hope for therapists today, is that you'll pay some attention to, are you focusing the session enough? Is your client going deep enough on this topic to then be able to walk out of your office and utilize it? And the nice thing is, all you have to do is check and see how it went when they come back. And a lot of times they'll tell you, oh yeah, it went great. I used it this way, this way, this way. Or they'll repeat back to you something completely different than what you had told them to do, which means you definitely did not hold focus on it long enough yet. So thank you so much for hanging out with me for a few minutes today. I am Jonathan Pishner with Apex Counseling, and I will see y'all next time.